It's Good Friday, and whatever today means for you, whatever it feels like, I hope that it is in fact a good day, even if it is a hard day, for any of a million reasons that have to do with faith or life or any combination of those. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, and find no rest. On Good Friday, we often spend a lot of time focusing on the agony of Christ, on the events, on the detail, on the things that happen, their symbolic meaning. And those words are words that he echoes, certainly the first of those. My God, why have you forsaken me? There are across the Gospels the 7 words that Jesus speaks from the cross, and these are some of the most powerful. But I didn't read to you from the Gospels. I read to you from Psalm 22, which begins with those words and holds a freedom that we find in quite a lot of the Psalms that is a very real thing. And that real thing is the silence of God. There are times in our lives, whether we are people of faith or not, where in our desperation, in our need, in our desire, in our hope, we cry out, we pray, we ask, we confess, we want freedom from the feelings we have about ourselves or about circumstances in our lives. We want things to change. We want to have faith. We want to have more faith. And those words, those prayers, those feelings, those deep expressions, even if we don't use words to make them, they seem to just fall into a hole. Psalm 22 resolves almost all of the Psalms that begin this way or contain within oh, my apologies, I'm more tired of my coughing than you are, I'm sure. They contain within them words that express great distress to God, even anger, but they all resolve to the end. And this psalm is no different. It's not that the person's situation changes, but they find a solid place to stand in their hoping. But again, that's not just something to easily read to and expect. It remains one of the great conundrums and questions of the Christian faith, that a God who is so relational is so silent. And some people say, well, we're not very good at listening. And that is true. We need to find ways of stilling ourselves. God is not in the business of grand gestures in response to our prayers. God is not in the business of spectacular answers, of countless moments of deep wonder and amazement that come upon us, that are bigger than the moment we're in and lift us above the ordinariness of the day. So yes, there is a learning of attention needed. That is a discipline of prayer, which isn't finding the right words or doing it at the right time every day or for a certain length of time, but about the subtle awareness that comes to us when we spend time quietly with ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings and the idea of God and the natural world, and perhaps the writings of people who share some of our experience. So there is work to do, there are things to learn, but there is also just the silence of God. And today, in all that we remember on Good Friday, we must not forget that Jesus knows the silence of God. And before we start to try and rationally debate that and understand that, how can Jesus, who is God, no longer be God, abandoned by God, not know God who he is anyway? That's not the point of today, to again make sense of this, but to know that Jesus somehow, in all of who he is and the mystery of that, knows deeply the silence of God. it seems sometimes that in the Christian church we feel obliged to to express the opposite of the silence of God, to make sure that our message is one of joy and connection and hope and depth and relationship, and not nearly enough, perhaps, do we talk about longing and wilderness and desert times and silence and the silence of God. I am not this morning going to try in a couple of minutes to explain the silence of God to you. But I'm going to say that Easter is hugely and significantly about the silence of God, about the question, where is God? Where is God? Not just for Jesus on the cross, but where is Jesus as God between Friday and Sunday? Where does he go? We rush to explain that. We rush to find a kind of itinerary for Jesus in the underworld, or somehow to give an answer to a great mystery: the absence of God, the silence of God, the death of God in these days. I wonder how much the church's mission and witness in the world has been held back by our unwillingness, I think, at times, to really sit with the pain and the struggle and the darkness that is the silence of God. We read the saints and they inspire us. We read the accounts of their lives, and yet we read of some of the saints who could hold on to just one or two proper, trustworthy experiences of God in the whole of their lives. We read John of the Cross, that great Carmelite friar, and we read of the dark night of the soul, part of his own, perhaps, attempt to explain midlife crisis in the way that meaning is lost in the things that used to speak to us of life and love and when God was simple. And those things are lost, they're gone, and we find ourselves bereft and in between and wondering where to find God, what God is saying, where God is saying it, and how we might learn to hear it, because we can't hear it in the places we've been or with the ears we've had up to now. You see, the track record is there, but somehow we avoid that. And our churches have not become, in ways that they needed to, the deep places of not knowing that they should be. Communities who sit in the silence of God together, because one of us or many of us are experiencing that. We run programs. We run programs around grief, around addiction, and they're all they're very good programs, but they are they are formulaic journeys, proven to help, but out of very particular circumstances. But sometimes there is just silence. There is just no answer to prayer. There is just a deep loss of what has been meaningful before. And I want to talk about that this Good Friday, because I wonder whether for many of us, when we return into our church's lives, the things that we are missing most, the familiar worship that we've been part of, the the kinds of conversations we long to have, I wonder how many of those will no longer serve their purpose. They will become for us experiences of the silence of God. And not because God has necessarily become silent, but because the things that defined what we believed and how we experienced that have been shifted and changed and moved and transformed and dissolved and had the rug pulled out from under them by 12 months or more now of the uncertainty of the coronavirus and the breaking of our patterns and the deep journeys, hopefully, we've all been on. God is sometimes silent. My God, why have you forsaken me? Those are Jesus' words today, amongst others. They're not necessarily our favorite words when we think of the words from the cross. We like the words of forgiveness for those who are putting him to death. We like more than the silence of God. We like Jesus reaching out beyond the cross and speaking to Mary and Peter and the disciples and somehow binding them as family. We like the moments that Jesus, in a sense, the ones in which he seems to transcend the cross and be bigger than it. But in these words, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus is diminished by the cross, and he's crushed by it, and he's abandoned in it, and he feels that. And we can debate whether that's logically true or not, or maybe God just felt distant but wasn't really. Well, that's of no consequence when our own experience of life is that we feel the silence of God. So my prayer for the churches I serve, my prayer for my tradition in this country and around the world, my prayer for the Christian church beyond this coronavirus pandemic, one of my prayers is for a deeply troubling and ultimately creative experience of the silence of God. Because in so many ways what we've been doing and the way we've been doing it just hasn't been working. It hasn't been flourishing. It hasn't been alive in the ways we would like it to be alive. It hasn't been attractive. It hasn't been compelling. It hasn't been liberating. Nearly as much as it might have been. So I pray for myself, I pray for you, I pray for us together. I pray for an experience of Jesus, in following Jesus, the mirroring in our own lives of this moment on the cross where the silence of God is the single greatest thing that he feels and knows and laments. Whatever your feelings are about the nearness of God, whatever your disappointments are in your praying in this last year or years past, whatever your questions and confusions are about where God is and how God is active and and what it means for us to have hope and trust and do what the Psalms do. Those Psalms resolve into the solidity of a hope in past experience and the testimony of others. That if we can land in that place, that might just help us to stay in the silence a little better and a little longer as we let God disturb us. And we find the things that were previously solid crumbling in our hands as we wait to see what might speak of God again to us and how we might speak of God together in the church to the world. So bless you this Good Friday. If you're watching this on YouTube, there is a link at the end which you might not be able to I apologize, simply click on. If you're watching on Facebook, in the post there's a link to a song called The Silence of God by Andrew Peterson, which is a very, very powerful song that I hope adds to what I've shared and expresses something of where you might be today. And so now we wait. We wait for Sunday, and then we puzzle over Sunday, and we celebrate Sunday, and we wonder what Sunday means, what it will mean to stand up again and be alive, and what form that will take. Bless you on Good Friday, on Holy Saturday, in the fallowness of it, in the nothingness of it, in the waiting of it, and then Easter Sunday, and hopefully something other than the silence of God, even just a little, so that we know that we're not alone, and we know that we are traveling with love and with grace and with each other as we are being dismantled and reconstructed at the same time. Bless you.